Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Mehdi Hasan did a video regarding his recent appearance on Jubilee. He did the Jubilee 20v1 debate thing, ended up debating people who were a lot further right and further into fascist insanity than he expected and was prepared for. So Mehdi's still a fantastic debater, so he still held his own, but he ran up against the problem that when you're debating literal outright fascists, these are people who don't actually believe in debate, and they don't believe in good faith exchange of ideas, and so they will participate in debate, but only for the sake of trying to project strength. And so there is a way to deal with that in debate, but it's something particular that you have to be prepared for. And so for the most part, I think Mehdi handled it in a way that reflects the right way to debate fascists or, other whatever you would want to call somebody that's that degree of far right. In some cases in that debate, they literally describe themselves as fascists. So Mehdi has been doing a big media tour since then, different podcasts, talking to different commentators about this debate on Jubilee, going over the points of the debate, going over as much of it as he can in terms of what happened behind the scenes, although it seems like they have people sign an NDA so that you can't actually describe much about what happens, off camera. And apparently there were people that went up and said things even worse than what we saw on camera and that sort of thing, but Mehdi's not allowed to actually disclose that. But he has been going over the fact that he was relatively unprepared for the level of far right that these people were going to be. The video is billed as far right conservatives, and Jubilee has kind of done that before. They even did it with Jordan Peterson, where they had him billed as Christian versus atheist, but then in the debate he says, "I'm not a Christian," and yet they still uploaded the video as Christian versus atheist. So they obviously know, what they're doing with their video titles. But it strikes me that Mehdi Hasan versus 20 fascists would be just as good for clickbait as far right conservatives, if not better. But Mehdi probably wouldn't have agreed to do it. But anyway, so Mehdi has been kind of trying to sort through the aftermath of a debate like that, given that it wasn't exactly what he expected. So he dropped a video about his 7 rules for debating fascists, or, he does air quotes, far-right conservatives. And I think these are good rules. And I think that Mehdi Hasan is going about this the absolute right way, because post-debate, he's not really engaging so much in the debate aspect of it, like going and continuing to debate, more far-right people about the debate, blah, 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 and engaging that way. But rather, he's talking to other people on the left about his experience. He's sharing his experience. And now he is trying to put the message out there of, this is how you can apply what I learned in that debate to your everyday life and debates that you might have. And this is really, really useful content, because while we may have come to our conclusions about how to handle these things, I'm not going to debate a fascist, I am, or I'm going to debate everybody, I'm going to debate nobody. But there's a lot of people out there that haven't thought about these things that much. And a program like Jubilee and the 20 versus 1 is the kind that reaches those people that aren't that sure about what they believe. Sometimes they find themselves convinced a little bit by some of these more radical voices that they hear. And that's how the right wing has made so much progress, is by piping up to a level that they're reaching people on kind of a mainstream audience basis. People that are not that engaged in politics, but they're managing to reach those people with like sort of exciting and sexy content. And 20v1 and Jubilee manages to accomplish that. They have a lot of young people in their audience base and all that. So Mehdi using this opportunity to say, this is how you handle people like this, and going over the details and putting it in a way that people can remember, I think is a great way to take advantage of the exposure that comes, after doing something like Jubilee. So let's listen to I just kind of condensed these 7 points that he has here, and then I'm going to talk about that. There's a lot to talk about here, and this is a particular situation where Mehdi even says in the debate that he's not going to debate certain people that explicitly identify as fascists, but at the same time, he found himself debating a bunch of people like that without realizing that was going to be the situation. So you've got to know how to handle people like this if you come across them, is what it comes down to. So let's listen to what Mehdi has to say about it.
Let's begin. Lesson number 1, always go on the offensive, because the best defense is a good offense. Too often, progressives just let conservatives beat them up. Rhetorically, I mean. We adopt this kind of defensive crouch. But that's not what you should do when you're confronted by a bully. You have to hit back hard. Lesson number 2, divide and rule. When you're facing multiple opponents, when you're outnumbered, the best way to deal with them is to turn them against one another. Look, I'm not just American, as I told the Jubilee folks. I'm also British. We invented divide and rule. Lesson number 3, expose the contradictions. Walk your opponent through their own foolishness, their own clear inconsistencies. Make it clear to your opponent, as well as everyone watching, how brazenly and demonstrably wrong they are. Do it in real time. Lesson number 4, bring receipts. This is key. You want to win a debate, even with self-confessed fascists and white supremacists? You have to know your stuff. You have to have your facts and figures ready to go. Your stats, your data. You need to have done your homework, done your prep. You need to really know your own side of the argument, but you also need to know the other side of the argument, their argument. And then you got to just drop those truth bombs. You got to overwhelm them with superior knowledge and all that homework in your head. If you do the prep, it really can be that simple and that devastating. I came prepared with my receipts, and you'll note that the independent fact checks on screen backed me, not them. Lesson number 5, mock them. Mock them, because in the right circumstances, mockery works. The right use of humor, of joking at your opponent's expense, can be deadly in a debate. The famous Roman orator Cicero was said to have used jokes as weapons of war, as a source of rhetorical power. And that's what I tried to do from time to time during that surrounded debate. Lesson number 6, don't budge. When you have a point to make or a question to ask that isn't being answered, when you're confronted by an opponent who is being evasive, deflecting, trying to change the subject, don't budge, don't move on, don't get distracted. Keep hammering away. But the biggest lesson of all from my appearance on Jubilee is lesson number 7. Don't debate fascists. They don't believe in debate or democracy. I had to explain this to Connor, the self-proclaimed and now unemployed fascist, who, by the way, I had no idea was a fascist before I turned up to do the Jubilee debate with those 20 people in that studio. So debating open fascists isn't a good use of time, and had I known beforehand that some of those folks would be open fascists and racists, I probably wouldn't have done that debate. But to be clear, I don't do debates to try and change my opponent's minds. I do it to try and win the hearts and minds of the people watching in the audience or at home on YouTube, to try and persuade the neutrals in the crowd. And so I do hope I got through to some of the 10 million people who have so far watched it on YouTube, watched that Jubilee debate. And I also hope that you now, watching this, have learned some key lessons when it comes to debate.
There you go. I like what Mehdi's doing here. This is a good way for him to use the attention that has been put on him because of this Jubilee thing in a way that's going to have some productive value. I do think there's some value to this content because, like I said, you know, there's a lot of people out there that I think are just now discovering their interest in these topics, their place on the political spectrum, what some of these alarming ideas mean, and where they come from, etc. And so, you know, people that want to push back against this sort of thing, but might not necessarily have like a deep grounding in political discourse or whatever, it always is good to have a reminder of what a productive debate performance can look like. Because I do think it's easy to get lost in the idea that, like, if you're on the right side of things, if the information is on your side, and even if you know the information, that means you're going to win the debate. And even when you're not debating psychopathic fascists, that's not true. Debate is more about spectacle And especially in the modern era, that's true. Where there are different forms of debate that can be in print or anything like that. But, you know, when there's cameras on and television involved and ratings involved and views involved and clicks involved, it turns debate into something that is really about what's going to get the most excitement out of people. And that's why this Jubilee format works. Not only because it's this, like, you know, time sensitive format, debating 20 people, ha ha ha, but then also because they get these alarming ideas on their platform. That's part of the appeal. It's shocking. It's good TV. I don't know if they did that on purpose when it comes to this Mehdi Hasan debate, purposely getting people that were going to say worse things than Mehdi was prepared for. Probably not, but I bet there's some people behind the scenes that let some things slide. That's the only way I can imagine this happened, other than them overtly deciding that they want to platform fascists, which I think at various stages in the production they had to have decided they were okay with that. But like I said, according to Mehdi, it also appears that they cut some things out because it was too much. So Mehdi does show some clips in this video of the Jubilee debate to kind of illustrate his use of these debate tactics. So it's worth watching if you want for that. Like I've said, I'm hesitant to post Jubilee clips because they demonetize and then they run ads on my content, but also because I'm just not sure about them as a platform at this point. They did an episode with Cenk Uygur, and that was a little bit more tame. It was like him versus Democrats and Republicans, and they're turning it into a bi-weekly series and podcast now. So they're turning up the production of these things. Who knows what direction it's going to go? It's either going to continue in this overtly fascist direction. If they don't want to be viewed as that type of platform, but they want to continue to platform the shocking things that they platform because it's good for clicks, what they need to do is really balance that out, because there's no shortage of people on the left that would love to come on a platform like this, insane things, in order to dunk on fascists from a left-wing, communist, anarchist perspective. There's plenty of people out there who would do that. And so if Jubilee was really trying to foster some kind of even debate, even if it's like a total shit show, that's what they would do. And even a platform like Piers Morgan, he doesn't platform people as quite as psychotic as this Jubilee thing, but you know, he platforms some pretty far right people, but also some pretty far left people. And so it makes for some interesting conversation on his platform. That's one thing I will give him, is that it's a genuinely balanced panel of people, even if he himself tips the scales to the right by being a pretty right-wing person. He also will have genuine counterparts to the right-wing perspectives that he has on his show, which makes for better programming. But you know, ultimately, I think the reason that it's hard to decide if this debate stuff is worth doing is because American politics is going in such a bad direction. And I do think that it's true that we can't really cede the ground of debate. We can't hide from these debates. And, you know, the only way to debate overt fascists like the ones that Mehdi was coming across is to try to humiliate them. And you have to really go personal. And yes, you have to have your information straight and you have to be able to make your case well, but you have to case that within a full-on dismissal and obliteration of them as a human being. Because so much of the fascist worldview is tied to them wanting to be important, them feeling like they are not valued and seen and important enough, and wanting the world to revolve around them. And they build an audience around it, because by projecting that egotism, they're able to keep looking like they're winning. And all of these fascists, despite the fact that Mehdi did a great job debating them about as well as he could have done, all of the fascists that he debated were able to walk away from that saying that they won. And that's just the nature of the game. And so the only way to attempt to debate people like that is to make it as impossible as you can for them to walk away saying they won. They have to be absolutely humiliated. But again, I mean, Mehdi's a good debater. That's not the kind of debate that he does. And I think there's a time and place for it, but the average person doesn't really need to be concerning themselves with that. And I think it's more so about equipping yourself for everyday life, your family, people you run into at the workplace, I run into people somewhat regularly, whether it's an Uber driver or a coworker or something, who kind of has like a casually right-wing view that they don't realize is as far right as it is. Or they listen to somebody like Candace Owens that they don't realize is as far right as she is. And so to be able to effectively refute their points in real time, not in some kind of like high pressure debate setting, but in just real life. And what happens when you can do that effectively is you one by one can give people the impression of sanity, that like this sort of left-wing ethic that we promote, certainly left of what is considered the center in American politics, which I would say is firmly on the right, you know, to sound like the sane ones again, to sound like the ones who aren't fucking psychotic. And that's what Mehdi did well in the Jubilee debate. However, I guess the only fear with that is that as America itself and American politics continues to become more insane, being the calm, rational ones also might not do the trick. But that's another conversation. So, real quick, some other stuff. There are some rumors that Ghislaine Maxwell is being given a work release from her current prison. So she was transferred to a prison in Texas that was more cushy than the one that she was previously at. So she was a lot more comfortable. She gets her little breaks and her little privacy and that sort of thing. She gets her little breaks and her little arts and crafts now. There's a rumor going around that she now has been, given a work release that is going to allow her to leave. That is not confirmed yet. It sounds true, and it could be that the Trump DOJ is trying to be discreet about it and not admitting that they've done that. But as of now, it's not confirmed. But it does seem like they're trying to give her at least a little bit of cushion, nice little cushy prison that she's at. And meanwhile, a judge has decided that they are not going to release the grand jury testimony of Ghislaine Maxwell. So this was going back and forth. This was one of the ways that Trump was going to try to appease his base on the Epstein stuff. These materials that they would be releasing is stuff that's already public. And that's basically what the judge said, is that they wouldn't be releasing any new information by doing this. It's a diversion, and that the DOJ is basically lying in their reasoning for doing so. So essentially a judge has called bullshit on this attempt to release the information, and also called out the fact that it's a dud anyway. So even if it was to be released, people wouldn't learn anything from that. The MAGA base seems to be pretty much moving on from this, and a lot of people are saying that the move to take over DC is a distraction from this as well, which it probably is, but also, I mean, it's right on time. It's not like Trump wasn't going to do that. So does he calculate whether or not he's going to do a certain move based on if he's trying to turn the news cycle away from something else? Yeah, probably. But it kind of doesn't matter. I think the Trump approach is less about like purposely distracting all the time, and it's more like everything at once. He's like, if I can just throw everything at the wall at once all the time, then I can continue to keep people on their heels. That is pretty much the strategy. So that's what he's doing here. We'll see what happens with Ghislaine Maxwell. She has more leverage than anybody in the world, maybe, because she singularly has the ability to let Trump off the hook for this Epstein stuff if they release her saying something about it in the right way. It seems like she's already kind of cleared his name internally, which doesn't tell them anything that they don't already know to be false. But what it shows is that she's willing to say that. She's willing to incriminate people other than Trump and leave Trump's name out of it, which is all they want from her. And it's very likely that they'll release her or pardon her or something if she does that. The question is if MAGA is gonna let them do it.